These leaders are proven luminaries, and they'll be talking about both the challenges and strategies. To start out, we'll do introductions. I'm Celia Jones. I am Chief Marketing Officer at Finn Partners. We are a global independent marketing and communications agency with a heart and conscience. Let's meet our guests. So first off is Anna Angelic, and she is a very prominent brand executive. She's the author of The Business of Aspiration, and she's one of Forbes' world's most influential CMOs. She specializes in building brand-driven modern businesses, and most recently she led the rebrand of Banana Republic as well as Chief Brand Officer at Esprit. She's also got a doctorate in sociology, so no slouch there. Next up, we have Samina Verk. She's North America CEO of Vestiaire Collective. Samina is leading this Vestiaire Collective, which is a global resale platform for pre-owned luxury brands. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that. She's a veteran of the e-commerce and retail industry. Her background really sits at the intersection of fashion and technology, which is obviously a very hot space right now. And she's held positions at eBay and Target, leading their designer collabs. Really esteemed, cool background there. And then we have Crystal Venice. Crystal is global brand leader and lifestyle and luxury brands for Hyatt. She's also a lovely valued client of ours, so we're grateful for Crystal to be here. Crystal's story is amazing. She started out her career as a veteran hotelier. She went to Cornell University's hotel school and started out in the hospitality industry as, really in various roles, from a valet and a bellperson, worked her way all the way up to front desk to all the way up to the brand side. So just a really inspiring story. She went on to oversee the W brand, moved to Brussels for a while, and oh, no big deal, then went on to launch Beats by Dre before coming back to Hyatt in her role. And she's VP and Global Brand Leader for their luxury and lifestyle brands, which include Andaz, Alila, Caption by Hyatt, Dream Hotels, Park Hyatt, and Thompson Hotels. Amazing, amazing background. And then finally, we have Colin Kavanagh, also quite a phenomenal panelist, Chief Marketing Officer at Pernod Ricard. He oversees marketing and innovation for Absolut, Jameson, Malibu, Kahlua, The Glenlivet, Perrier Jouet, Mom, you name it, busy man. Just wanted to start there because these people have really been, have had really powerful experiences building brands in different segments of the luxury and lifestyle market. So I think they'll bring great perspective to this conversation. So these are change makers, and we're going to hear how they're dealing with the change in the industry and driving growth in this landscape. All right, so we're going to start out just talking about the role of brand marketing. It used to be that you were responsible for launching advertising campaigns, driving awareness, great. Now the role of CMO or brand leader has changed dramatically in recent years. That's accelerated. So I want to just start out with each person just sharing what your role as a brand leader is and how you've seen changes over the last few years. So let's start with you, Anna.
Yeah, so since Banana Republic and probably even before, my role is Chief Brand Officer. My most recent role was Chief Brand Officer and Chief Marketing Officer. And I'm seeing more conversation about what is the difference between the two, because for me it was like they just call you Chief Brand Officer and give you more stuff, So I was like, okay, sure, I know what you're doing here, but it's fine. So it was more like having brand strategy, which is marketing strategy, media buying and planning, content strategy, social media strategy. Then creative, which is all creative output from seasonal campaigns all the way down to e-commerce, photography, social media. And then in every organization I come in, starting with Banana Republic, probably Rebecca Minkoff before that, I created a third function, which is cultural influence function, which is not traditional PR, editor relationship, but it's more about influencer relationships, but then partnerships, creative partnerships, collaborations. So you have those three things. And at Banana Republic and Esprit, I also had design under me in terms of annual concepts, the cadence, the storytelling, the hero products, the product pyramid, as well as archive reissues and so on. So you see how holistic that role has become, and how this basically the verticals have been broken down, and they still pay you like one person.
So my role is North America CEO, and Vestiaire Collective is a French-born brand, and so we have a pretty strong centralized team in Paris. And the way I describe my role is I'm a general manager who's covering a lot of different topics, and I lean the heaviest into brand marketing based on my background. So I've been both general management, I've led marketing strategy and execution across both digital and traditional media. I think my sort of profile is a little bit more of an operating CEO, so I'm coming in, working alongside our founders and helping growth. But your example of how the role has evolved I think my role is a good example of that. So I'm really leading the brand growth and the marketing strategy within the US market. And so for us, it really is holistically tied to our brand marketing is tied to our business growth, our sales growth, our merchandising strategy in the US, our commercial strategy in the US, and our supply strategy in the US. So it's very much linked together. And I think just being in that regional office of our brand also makes me wear many hats and only have one head. So yeah, similar situation, different topics.
And I think it's interesting that you are CEO, but you came from a branding background and you have digital. So these are the kinds of confluence of expertise that needs to come to bear on this type of role. Crystal.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here, and thank you for that intro. I hope I live up to it. But my role at Hyatt, and I'm based in LA, and our headquarters is actually in Chicago, is to oversee the global strategy of each of those brands. And I have 7 brands that I look after today. So from brand to brand, the strategies change, the point of view changes, and the emotional connection that we try to develop to connect our guests to that, to each of those brands changes as well. And so, that's my professional spiel of like, that's what I do. On the other side of it, I'm like, I get to live a life and be a chameleon every day to express and showcase each of my brands in a different light. Today I'm in my Andaz bag, which is very creative. It's all about self-expression and very vibrant. It's a lifestyle brand. But yesterday I was in my Park Hyatt bag, which is more luxury, more contemporary luxury with a modern twist. And for me, it's very important that I authentically connect to my brands as the brand leader as much as we want our consumers to. And so internally, they joke that, first of all, I change my voice depending on what brand I'm talking about. And I'm just like,
live the brand,
like, oh, you're in your Alila voice, so we're going into well-being, yeah. But I have peers that oversee the different collections at Hyatt, and people joke that we literally epitomize our brands. They can't do what I do, and I can't do what they do. And to me, that is the biggest compliment. And so as a steward of those brands, it's important to me that that shows up every day. And when you walk into a Park Hyatt, the experience that you have, the visual identity, the product, the design, that comes from my team and working with different functions around the world. And you being able to see that distinction is a big part of what we do when we talk about leading brands in my world.
Great. Colin?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces of some of my team in the audience here, so I really have to watch what I say today. I think, no, just to build on what everybody has been saying, Pernod Ricard, we manage quite a large portfolio of different brands, wines and spirits brands. Probably 2 different types of brands in the portfolio. You have big brands where, it's activating the full mix, the full marketing mix. And then we have these smaller jewels in the crown. We call them these smaller, maybe more niche brands that sit in segments or sub-segments. And the whole idea there is to really nurture those brands and scale them up over time. So 2 different types of brand profile. But really, my job is to drive growth for the company. I think that's really the expectation that's on me, is to map out what the growth trajectory with our portfolio brands is going to be. And my own sort of history on this, I've always found in my career, and I've spent a long time working for Pernod Ricard, but I've always found the good marketeers are the people that have one foot very firmly in the present, where they're really managing the day-to-day and driving what needs to be done right now, but they always have their other foot in the future, and they're looking ahead. And back to what you were saying, Celia, about sort of anticipating where the market is going to go, where our consumers are going to go, and then preparing whether it's their brand or maybe it's a sub-portfolio of brands to anticipate that. So I think that agility of being in the present and also being in the future is really, really important. Given everything that's going on at the moment, it's probably even more relevant.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think that everybody can see 4 hats, 400 roles within those hats. So let's get right into the fire, which is how do you make the case for brand marketing in challenging economic times? Just out of curiosity, how many of you out there have ever faced questions from your executive stakeholders about whether or not that budget is going to be approved or had to make a case for it? So this is what we want to unpack. I mean, it's really complicated. Everybody's business, even in the luxury sector, people are feeling the pressure of the recession, or just thinking about their purchases differently, or just holding off on purchases. And so I think that's what we kind of want to get into. How do you make the case for investment in branding and brand marketing in this pressured situation? So I want to start with Anna. You've been really vocal about just managing stakeholder expectations and strategies to speak to that stakeholder audience.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a very, I think it's important question, because it sort of defines success. We can talk about brand marketing as long as we want, but at the end of the day, if there is not that financial rationale, it's going to be very challenging to actually execute. So what it means for me, the first thing is to really redefine what brand marketing is. If you're still considering is like, as you said, as TV, print advertising, PR, then it is hard to create a financial case, because we are basically talking about formats from 50 years ago when the environment and culture was completely different. But if we redefine it as a strategy of cultural influence, and we say, hey, it's also collaborations, it's also merchandising, it's also creative partnerships, it's fandom building, it's content production, editorial, entertainment, then the role of brand marketing is different. And then if you consider it like that, then you're really considering the full funnel. Right. And then you have a different conversation once you have a full funnel, because before it used to be awareness consideration, but then after purchase happens, then it's someone else's job, and it's not, and that can't be. You
can't pass the buck anymore, right?
No, because imagine if you have a membership program. Again, is that how are you communicating brand values? How are you communicating your brand narrative? And how do you communicate your brand promise to that customer? It doesn't stop after purchase. It goes through loyalty, advocacy, and so on. So that is looking at the wider. The second thing is, it's like that more holistic view. The second thing is what I brought up before, is like, how does brand marketing work with product design, with merchandising, with business? So that's important. With product design, if you say, hey, we are doing archive issue, those are our signature products, all of a sudden that accountability is spread, and everyone works together to achieve results, and that's measurable. Right. With merchandising, what is the rollout plan here? What is the drip of our products? What is the
even
scenario?
Sourcing, right? Yeah.
All of that. With business, how do we connect commercial planning with marketing planning? How do we make our promotions part of your P&L? So it's not like a fire sale, it's actually strategically defined. And then for me, the last thing really quickly is, what are we really measuring here? We are using the same metrics we used so long ago for problems that are completely different. And at the end of the day, we are measuring efficiency. The problem of companies is not efficiency, it's creativity.
Right.
Like efficiency killed Kodak. You know, they were doing more and more and more, but innovation was happening elsewhere.
Right.
So at the same time, it's about creative approach to solving problems. So I think brand marketing, because it traditionally has creativity embedded, that is sort of something that needs to spread as what is the creative solution to this problem in merchandising, in product, in business, and so on. So that is for me the most important thing. How do you make organizations more creative, not more efficient?
Absolutely. It's funny, in the first panel this morning, I know some of you weren't able to make it, but Heis Nabayati, she talked about we shifted to cultural impact, or someone keep me honest, instead of reach. We are redefining and doubling down on cultural impact as a measure of our success. So it's just what you're saying.
They call this brand marketing a strategy of cultural influence, really. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. How about you, Samina?
Well, I agree with everything she just said. So
That's not allowed.
no, but I think what's really interesting is actually a difficult environment can help justify brand marketing even more, because when you go into a macro, so the joint answers, but when you go into this macroeconomic environment that we've had where sales are soft, customers are spending less, they're no longer going to just go to everywhere. They're going to go to the brands that they have a strong relationship with, that they trust, that they know, that they have some connection to. And so I think, you can take the difficult times as a justification as to why we need to build this stronger brand relationship with clients and with customers, so that, if you're only relying on, so in my world, if you're only relying on performance marketing, if you're not showing up first in search, or somebody else comes up a little bit cheaper, that's it, you've lost them. And you're not going to survive the waves. And so I think if you take that approach, plus actually what Colin mentioned, which is keeping one eye on the future and one eye now, that's how you can build your story. And we very much also are kind of that belief where, I don't even call it brand marketing internally. I call it brand growth. And I 100% agree that you have to start looking at it as one of the different inputs towards growth, and that they're all connected. And so I think sometimes when you have that approach and you have your teams approaching it that way, I think that does help sort of form the connection. And it also gives accountability. You're not accountable for just these impressions or these PR impressions, these social impressions, these reach, the CPM, but we're all accountable for the growth. How do we each contribute into that growth? I think that has helped a little bit.
That's really smart. I think, using different language changes the body language. At least you're starting to frame, even if they don't get it right away, probably don't just from the name change, but you're just reframing how your stakeholders need to think about it. So I think that's really powerful. Crystal.
That's huge. We do the same as well. So I call what I do more brand management than brand marketing, because brand marketing for a lot of people, or marketing in general, creates a more siloed idea of what we do. And so when you have an operator that, you're just doing the marketing and the campaign thing, but in my world, we are managing from end to end everything that connects to this brand. And what's important in my industry, and what's different probably amongst my colleagues up here, is that when economic crisis hits, travel is the first thing that goes. It goes down to zero. And it's also the first thing that comes back, because what's the first thing you want to do when you get a little money in your pocket? You want to go somewhere, right? So
revenge travel.
Exactly. And in the luxury segment, they don't have to stop traveling. They just stop because they feel like maybe people will judge them if they do. So they're looking for permission. And so in my world, we are still in a very much experience-driven economy. And so that means I might have an emotional connection to your brand, but there's less forgiveness if I have an experience that isn't what you marketed to me. And so when you start to, in a period of economic downturn, cutting the things that make the experience what it's supposed to be, and trying to be over-reliant on brand marketing, that's a problem. And then when you're trying to cut marketing, to then expect people to show up in your hotel just because you exist, that also is a problem. So I think for me, the management of the brand includes the experience piece that we want to continue to elevate to ensure that, I mean, look, when you travel, you have one bad experience on Delta and you're like, I'm never flying them again. But I'm a Delta loyalist and I'm like, oh, it's okay. Next time I'll do better, right? And so, but that's because I have frequently had an experience that has matched what they've marketed to me as what's important. And within travel, we try to do the same thing where we're marketing to you, this is the experience you'll have, because travelers, they look for the location first and then the brand or hotel second. So then that second click down is like, well, what's going to appeal to me about your brand without having experienced it first. So then they rely on your storytelling to tell you what that is. And so it's important.
Exactly. And I think it's the storytelling, right? If you have a plethora of choices, and trust has been talked about a lot, it's your relationship that you've built, you know, it's your positioning for sure, but that trust you have with your customer and loyalty, and that even allows forgiveness for a mistake here or there because you have the consistency of that relationship and authenticity over time.
Irrational loyalty, you're right.
Right.
Unreasonable loyalty even, yeah.
Right. Okay, how about you, Colin?
Where to start after all of that? No, I have two add-ons, two things. Maybe just to say, first and foremost, the journey that we've been on marketing at Pernod Ricard, it very much mirrors, I think, the way marketing has evolved and changed and the transformation marketing has had. I mean, you know, 10 years ago it was all around content and digital marketing was a thing. Then we had influencers, MarTech, big data. Now, of course, it's all around Gen AI, and there was a panel earlier today on that. So we've shifted alongside that. You know, if I look at our team today, 70% of our team are in specialist roles. So we've built that MarTech capability. We've built great capability in demand science, marketing effectiveness, which we might talk about as well, been able to measure the ROI for everything we do. But my learning is, again, as we've gone through that, the generalist or brand management roles are now only 30% of the total marketing team. And yet, I believe those are the most important roles. They really are, because with everything that's changing, you got to come back to building brands, and you got to come back to solid foundations. Solid foundations is a clear positioning, knowing your target, having a full way of activating your brand, full funnel activation, as you were talking about, Anya. So for me, that's so important. And that's one of the things we're doing now, is we're really working to elevate the role of brand management within our marketing team. I think that's super, super important.
Right. That's really powerful. And I think, you know, there are few roles. I always say this when I talk about even what I do, like the marketing function, brand marketing function, is the connective tissue across all of the various silos. And there are very few roles like that, but they're needed now more than ever. I think you even said that. Everybody agrees, right? But what you're talking about, Colin, is structural, operational change in order to fulfill what everybody else has been talking about. So I'm curious if anyone else has examples of that, because I think we can all agree in theory, not even in theory, in practice, in reality of what branding encompasses, but operational structural change is hard. So I'm just curious if
I've been thinking about that in terms of middleware. You know how they say, oh, organizations need to be more creative, and I'm like, I don't want a financial controller to be more creative. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, so you need like that creative strategy function who connects basically, but like who breaks the silos and creates. It's all about, I don't know if you would agree, but for me, it's all about the process. How do you create the process that goes from brand marketing? It doesn't need to start with that, but it's like connects product and merchandising and commercial planning and everyone in the same room and everyone part of the same process. That's more rare than you would think.
It is. But even roles like creative technologists, like those blurred roles is where you get more synergies and both understanding and also accountability, right? So,
yeah, if I can just jump in as well on that, I think, you know, what I've observed as well is you know, we're trying to get, I think, marketing closer to business, closer to the business. And that's where that brand marketing role can really drive that. And you need to have end-to-end responsibility for the marketing mix. You know, if you're working at a very expert-driven model, it can be a little bit siloed from time to time. You really need someone who can connect the dots as the custodian of the brand and make sure that it all actually fits together, and hopefully it adds up to something greater than just the sum of its parts.
Exactly.
And I think also it depends on the size of business, right? Because I'm coming from the e-commerce space. There's been these businesses which have gotten to a point where they have this really strong sort of growth marketing function, and then they have a brand marketing function. And I think as they get bigger, it's continued to get more siloed. So I think that's where we've seen the industry pendulum swing a little bit to back and forth. And it's like, how do you make sure that they're all laddering up to the same thing, which is the growth of the business?
Right. Okay, so let's pivot over to storytelling. That word is used a lot, but I think it is interesting. It would be interesting to get your perspectives on what brand stories do you tell to drive sales? How do you connect with your audience in a way that resonates? For ourselves at Finn Partners, when we talk about, I had introduced us, we are an agency with a heart and conscience. What does that mean? That the purpose, it's not just altruism, but there's a core value system that informs the people that we hire, the companies that we acquire, the companies we won't work with, actually, is something that's been a calling card for us. So we won't work with fossil fuels or climate denial. We actually have a list, right? So sometimes the stories that we tell are things we won't do, but that still has a resonance that has attracted clients and talent to join us. So, I'm curious about, let's start with you, Samina, because I think Vestiaire has some interesting stories related to your brand purpose.
Well, I think first is to really make sure that the storytelling is authentic to who the brand is. So I think you described Vestiaire, we're a resale platform for secondhand luxury and designer fashion. And our mission really is to transform the fashion industry towards a more sustainable future by empowering our community and collective to drive the change. And we have sort of 4 distinct pillars, which is taste, which is sort of our fashion curation, trust, which is through authentication, community, because we're a marketplace, and then sustainability. And the sustainability pillar has actually been one of the core pillars from the beginning. And so the idea was, yes, secondhand fashion is about accessibility, affordability, but it's also about extending the life of an item and participating in the circular economy because of the impact on the environment. So over the years, the way that we've approached branding and brand growth is to take those pillars and sort of give ourselves pulse moments in each one of those. And, we want to have a moment in the fashions, in those fashion moments, we want to tell a story about our authentication. We want to tell a story about how we authenticate, who our authenticators are, how can they tell fake versus not. We want to tell a story about our community. We have this amazing collective of 80 countries represented of buyers and sellers. Look at their closets, look at the amazing finds. And then for us, it's sustainability is also a pulse moment. So we've had, over the years, I would say we sort of go back and forth between those moments, but we've had quite a few impact pulse moments. We released one of the first impact reports a few years ago where we really sort of informed people of the benefits of secondhand and the environmental impact. It was really important for us to become a B Corp because we felt that that was really the way to hold ourselves accountable. But since then, we've run many moments celebrating that. And I think one of the ones that we were talking about backstage is just coming off of November, we ran a ban fast fashion campaign where we said, we do not want to sell any fast fashion on our platform. Because for us, the circular fashion isn't just about buying secondhand. It starts at the beginning of that circle. Buy better, invest, buy better quality so that it will last longer, but it'll also be able to be resold. And if you're not thinking about the sort of circular momentum at the beginning of the purchase life cycle, you're sort of negating the whole concept of sustainability, environmental impact. So we really, right before Black Friday, we decided to say, think first, buy second. And we, developed this visual campaign that went viral of what all of the items that end up at landfills, over 90 million, would look like if it was in your backyard. And so for us, it wasn't a selling moment. It really was a storytelling moment about overconsumption, about waste, about what it's doing to our environment. And so for us, it wasn't the time to sort of push the sell moment.
Right. But that's so powerful. And I think that, it just goes to show it wasn't just a one-off campaign. You're walking away from sales. You're actually acting compatible with what you're saying. So I think that's, and the certified B Corp is just another example of proof and trust, right, rather than gimmicks.
And we have our sales moments, you know,
course,
and at the
right.
but for us, the sales moment is more about talking about our selection, about our community, about the fashion moment, right? It's less about making sure every bit. So I think storytelling, authentic to your brand, decide which stories to tell when, and stay true to them, even, you know, during those peaks and valleys.
Right. Okay, Crystal, how about you?
Keep taking all of mine. I mean, yeah, but, you know, similar, you know, the three things I think about is you've got to know who you are, stay true to that. You've got to know who you're talking to and speak to them in a relevant way. And it's got to be real. Like, it has to be real, especially today in this IRL life. I mean, who knew, especially during that time of Instagram when everything was so polished, you see the hands and the beautiful background, and it probably took them 5 minutes to film it and 5 days to edit it, right? Now we got TikTok where we're like, hey y'all, how y'all doing? You know, and there's no, you know, there's not as much going into making it polished. People want to see it as real. And in my world, you know, when you see the 20, you know, the question was about driving sales. When you see the 20% off and all those things, that stuff doesn't come from my team. What comes from my team is creating that affinity and aspiration to connect with my brand. So when I think about storytelling, I'm thinking about my target. I'm thinking about what I want to convey with my brand, because it's hard to show the product without it feeling like background in the hotel, right? When I worked at Beats, it was easy. I could put some headphones on LeBron James and call it a day, right? And then you see did that sound like a flex? It wasn't meant to be a flex. I'm sorry. But you see the product. Nike does the same thing. You see the product. In travel and in hotels, I have to show you the experience, and I have to have you envision you in that moment. And so
by the way, those are different per each brand.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And so that's why it's important to know who you are and then know who you're talking to, because how you speak to them will change and what you show them will change based on the behaviors that are changing for them every day. And so, you know, the most recent example I can think of is probably Andaz, which we just did kind of a rebrand and refresh. The name in Hindi means personal style, but for years we were only focusing on the surface part of that, style being, oh, how you dress, and like literally just style. But when we dug into it and spoke to people who, for Andaz, that had meaning, folks who speak Urdu, and they were like, actually, Andaz means so much more. It means the essence and substance of who you are, how you show up in the room, how your energy emanates in that room. That's your Andaz. And I was like, what a great insight. When you think about travel and the permission that we give ourselves to get out of our own comfort zones, that's probably one of the few mediums where you go to a new city, no one knows you. I have a travel name, it's Amber. And sometimes it's Ashley.
I need to hear
I know,
more about
we don't have to dig
later.
into it now. But the point is, like, folks allow themselves to have a little bit more freedom of expression and flexibility. And so we tapped into that insight from our guests who said that when they travel, they sometimes want a respite from the economic downturn that they're facing at home. They want a respite from, you know, although they're traveling with their kids, the hectic nature of life with a family where they live. And so they want to be a little bit different, lean into who they are and don't get to be at home, or lean into who they've always thought they want to be. And how amazing of a connection is that to the word Andaz, which is about being your true self. And so our latest campaign is called Be Like No One's Watching, which really leans into this idea of, yeah, eat the extra shrimp platter and order the dessert, right? And that's indulge like no one's watching. Play, you know, have fun. Even in luxury, you don't have to take yourself too seriously. And I think sometimes we do that.
Permission.
And so it's giving folks permission, and that's how we took an insight and also connected it with who we are as a brand and tried to tell that story.
That's awesome. I'm just looking at your shoes. Andaz needs to make those shoes. Do a collab. Sorry.
Well, this was already a collab. But yeah,
okay, Colin, you have a really interesting example, I think, of a brand, you know, just having purpose that's genuine and authentic to your audience. So why don't you share that one with everyone?
Yeah, I have a few examples, but
yeah.
I'll pick one or two. I think just to build on what you were saying, everybody's hitting the nail on the head when, you know, you have to be authentic. You know, I think that's the key thing for me. And then you have to stay true to that. So I think there's another dimension to it, which is consistency. I think people see through when you chop and change, people see through that.
And they'll call you out.
And
they won't just see it.
And they will definitely call you out. So, you know, with Absolute, we've, you know, since the inception of the Absolute brand, we've always been in the corner of LGBTQ. And we've done that for the last 40 years. That's a great example. You know, it's part of the brand. It's an important part of the brand. Jameson, different example, but you know, Jameson is where I'm from. It's an Irish brand. We take the whiskey making very seriously, but the brand doesn't take itself too seriously. And that consistently has come across with the Jameson brand. It's the tone of voice of the brand. It's witty, it's fun, it's playful. It's never too serious. So I think if you stick to those values and you use those as your compass, I think that's how you can really build your brand.
Cultural relevance. Everybody talks about being culturally relevant. People chase it, but what does that mean? I think, you know, you've covered a lot of it in here already, which is authenticity and just making sure you're dialed in. But do you have perspectives on brands trying to be culturally relevant and how you do it successfully in, you know, just especially within this fragmented landscape and, you know, all of these converging influences?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, which is basically full funnel and a lot of different cultural products and cultural output, like creative partnerships or collaborations or entertainment or a content series, whatever you put out, or events or retail experiences, everything is sort of a cultural production, which goes again to what we were talking before. It's like, how do you create a creative organization, really? Because when you look at what brand marketing did before, it really was telling those narratives that are through campaigns. And now it's more than top down, it's bottoms up. Because what you're looking right now is like, oh, cowboy aesthetics with Cowboy Carter that was just captured, but it's been going on for 3 years. So the question more of narratives and storytelling is, how do we participate in this aesthetic, in this story, in this cultural narrative? Because culture is a story that we tell ourselves to make sense of the world. And brands are stories. Without that, it would just be a commodity that is interchangeable. Like when you look at also how it comes, how the stories are told in the culture, how do you have those interstitial storytelling? We all live in a Marvel cinematic universe, you know. Imagine your brand creative universe, you know what I mean?
Everything everywhere all at once.
Exactly, always on. So this is like, it's not anymore waiting 4 times a year to give your campaign. It's like always probing culture, always doing something. And then you connect all of that. And I always like to say, if you do a lot of cultural signals through those collaboration, entertainment, and all of that, then those signals will get synchronized in a cultural frequency, and that's what your brand is about.
But isn't it exhausting? I mean,
unbelievably
exhausting. Like, I try to stay on trend, but I'm overwhelmed, right? Like, and brands aren't dictating to your customers anymore. We're reacting to. We're working in partnership with. It's up, down, and across. So how do you keep up with them?
Because I was actually going to say there's a difference between what's trending and what's culturally relevant. And I think understanding that distinction and that nuance is really important, because if you are reacting and you're only following the trends, there's nothing that's going to be sustaining about that. And I think the biggest differentiator between the two, culture is sustainable. It's sustaining. And you know, I got to tell you, Anna, you took my thunder too, because I was challenged.
Everyone is claiming this. Why did you put me in the
Well, we're all smart. How about that? But I was challenged ahead of this panel to like drop Cowboy Carter in there, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, and you did it first.
Drop it in a few
but
more
it was
times.
going to be in this answer, because when you're right, like Beyonce has been, the cowboy has shown up in all of her creative on her last 2 albums, and then she's from Texas, so it's the continuity humility that counts. So it's a part of her culture. She showcases it to you in different ways, and might not show up in the most overt way or in the most like on the nose, which is overt, but it's the
You don't
consistency.
think projecting your stuff onto the museums all over town was
Well, but what I'm saying is there's consistency in that,
Consistency in
right?
her- yeah,
And
absolutely.
like what Anna's saying, it's not about the one moment or reacting to it. It's the little pieces that sustain. And then the other thing is this audience, they will call you out on your BS so quickly because they see through what's not real.
Right.
And so if you're doing stuff that is clearly reactive and not in line with what you have already established for yourself, you've already lost before you enter the game.
And I
Right.
think, like, just to, jumping in, just to say what I meant. So, for example, for me, great example is Calvin Klein's campaign.
Oh.
It was the right
Carmi?
cultural moment when that was released. It was released in any other moment.
Yeah.
It was just before the Grammys, when Jeremy Allen White was
Right.
winning. It was before artists.
Uh-huh.
It was released as a social. It was released 3 months before. It wouldn't have.
Right.
3 months later, it wouldn't have. But
Right.
then they built upon that later, or the
Uh-huh.
Beckham's documentary. So it's not about what's trending. It's really if the cultural moment is relevant. Beckham documentary. The documentary became a meme, became a T-shirt, became an Uber ad. See, so
Right.
that is that.
By the
sort
way,
of-
was a remix from an original brilliant idea that stood the test of time, right? Brilliant, yeah.
I think one way to embed that a little bit more, because you are right, like every brand can't do everything, especially on limited means, which I'm sure all of us are suffering right now. And when you get overwhelmed, by the way, what do? You go back to the brands that you have a relationship
Exactly.
with. But I think one way to embed the thinking is to say, is to focus a little bit more on who your customer or your client is, because I think that will help answer which moments you speak about and mirror that with what is authentic. So who is your customer? What matters to them when they're interacting with their brand? There's going to be some things that you might want to let pass because it's not authentic to who you are. But there might be other moments that you've been consistently talking about. Like for us, it's sustainability. For it's for Beyonce, it's the cowboy theme. It's the Southern theme. But it's like, how do you then say, oh, this matters to our customer when they're shopping or when they're doing X, Y, Z. So I'm going to tell that story to them that's relevant. And I think you do have to make some trade-offs. Like you don't have to be everything all the time, but you have to make sure that when you do speak, it makes sense for your customer.
Trade-offs 100,000,000%. Okay, we're getting close to time, so I want to end on success stories. And I'm going to start with you, Crystal, because you keep getting scooped. Can you give us each one example of one of your proudest, most successful branding efforts?
It started with Colin,
I can't win here, Crystal. Go ahead.
I'm really proud of the work we've been able to do on Thompson recently. Thompson, Hyatt acquired that brand. It had 9 hotels. We're in New York. This is the home of that brand, and it's existed for over 20 years, and it's always punched above its weight. So when I joined, people assumed Thompson had like 30, 40 hotels, and we had 9. And so that was great. And it's been 20 years and we only have 9, right? So there is an element of that. And when I dug into the brand a little bit, there's just such a rich history in New York. It's always been in these markets. And when it enters a market and into a place, I mean, y'all remember 60 Thompson, like where it was in Soho? It was a little bit shady when it opened around that time. But now the area is like one of the most popular areas that there is. And that usually ends up happening with that brand. So taking that insight again, we rebranded and refreshed it and made it a little more modern for today and a little more timeless as well. And we introduced this program called Culture Lives Here, which highlights culture shifters, what we call culture shifters, and it's folks who are shifting culture in their communities through their craft, whether it's as a writer, as a singer, as an artist, as a dancer, and we tap this cohort and give them a platform. One of the biggest inhibitors to creatives is space, and paying for space and having the space and the platform to be able to get in front of an audience like this and showcase the work. And so I'm very proud that we've been able to, it's our 3rd year now going into it. And actually Culture Lives Here is now the umbrella, because we're doing, in the same way that we're providing a platform for culture shifters and creatives, we're going to do the same for our culinary and our chefs. And we also want to do the same for our consumers where, and this came out of kind of the pandemic and our great Maverick team, Thompson dinner party. So a taste of Thompson. So you might host a dinner party at home, but you don't want to deal with the cleanup. So like, let us help you do that. And so we want to extend the Culture Lives Here platform into our hotels and give you an opportunity to impress your friends with a taste of Thompson and curate those dinners for you. And so I'm just excited that we've been able to provide. I mean, when you see the feedback from these creatives that are like, wow, that opportunity gave me an opportunity and connected me to this agent. Or somebody who was in the audience at the Thompson Central Park and saw my performance was shed to tears and then ended up doing a full page write-up on them and getting them exposure that they had never had before. That is, for me, a proud thing, because I don't, kind of like what you were saying earlier, I'm not leading with the brand as much as I'm using the brand to facilitate those connections and curate it. So I'm very proud of that.
And I can vouch for it. I'm staying there, and it's lovely. It's awesome. Stay there.
Thank you.
Not unpaid endorsement here. Okay, Colin, go ahead.
All right. I will speak to actually probably the most recent thing. St. Patrick's Day. You're aware of St. Patrick's Day? So we had a bit of a challenge. St. Patrick's Day this year, because of leap year, fell on a Sunday. Had to do something about that. So we created a holiday. We created St. Patrick's Eve. And so we partnered with two comedians from Saturday Night Live, you might know, Michael Che, Colin Jost.
So great.
To get the word on the street that actually the party was going to happen on St. Patrick's Eve. And I'm proud of that, because it was a real full team effort. We were talking about the structure and organization. I saw like our expert teams, our brand teams really working together. Our PR team, everybody really, really working together. And that's what you want. That's what you need. So we ended up doing a ball drop, because it's like New Year's Eve, St. Patrick's Eve. We did a ball drop in Times Square. It's the first time there's been a ball drop outside of New Year's Eve in Times Square.
Wow, that's great.
And to cap it all off, we had a great piece of brand experience there as well. So you had the full mix really working. And some really creative media buying as well. We took over the Sphere in Las Vegas, did the countdown in Vegas, did the countdown in LA.
Y'all got money.
So.
Want to partner together?
Oh.
But you know, that's so brilliant. But so many
It was great.
Every pit, right? Yeah.
A little bit biased, but it was great.
Congrats. A lot of brands do stunts. A lot of stunts are clearly stunts that don't make sense, but you had everyone working together because the idea actually made total sense for the brand, right? That's brilliant.
Well, there have been a few, but I'll talk about one that we just launched, so it's just the beginning of our brand journey. How do you talk about a global marketplace in a very crowded market where you have some big players that have been around for a while, and you have a name that nobody can pronounce? So we worked with an agency to, and also knowing that we have our trade-offs, we can't blanket all of the United States with a brand marketing campaign.
With the Times Square ball drop.
I have.
Birkin ball drop. Wait a minute.
Next year we're going to be there. No, but you know, when you take all of that into consideration, how do you talk about the brand? So we worked with this really great creative agency, and we came up with this concept called Parlez-vous Vestiaire Collective. So it's all about how do you introduce our brand, play up the fact that we're French-born, make a little bit of fun of it. How do you showcase that we, because of our huge catalog and the fact that we have a big community and we're a marketplace, that there's something for everyone? And how do you pronounce our name? So what we did is we created a series of videos where it's basically Parlez-vous Vestiaire Collective, and I say it the American way. So and then, you know, can you say fashion? Do you speak secondhand? Can you say vintage? And so we've come up with a number of different creative assets and also sort of speaking points, really highlighting, you know, the things that make us different. Can you say, you know, set your own price when you sell an item? Can you say, you know, the lowest selling fees so you'll make the most money?
That's great.
And we took all of our differentiators and sort of built it into this campaign. And then we also did one, can you say Vestiaire Collective? And we sort of broke it down to Vestiaire, using clothing as an example. So we just launched it, but I think there's a lot of potential to grow right now. The other element we added to it is we made it a very social first video series, because that's where our digital branding campaign is playing the most. And I think that's really important, right? We had to make a trade-off. We went for digital branding. So how do we create assets that work for that? And so I think there's a lot of potential for us to use this campaign in many more ways. So I'm really proud of that.
I love that. That's so playful. Great. Okay, how about
So
you?
for me, it was rebrand of Banana Republic because that really everything I've been talking about here came together, which means product design, hero products, curation of archives, merchandising, website redesign, flagship store redesign, the signature look, and brand campaign.
That's
so
incredible.
the entire thing really came together in like 9 months, which is like unbelievably quickly.
Wow.
And that's what I want to say is that revenue is then lagging indicator of brand because it took 1 quarter for us to see results, and it was 27% year-on-year growth.
Wow, that's
in
impressive.
January after September relaunch.
Incredible.
It really is. And you have to capture that window of opportunity, but make no mistake, you need 3 to 5 years for
So
the,
this
you
is-
know,
yeah.
for the full, but it's very encouraging when you have that first impetus.
That's incredible.
Unbelievably
What
proud of
what
it.
you did there is incredible. And that is one core takeaway. I think that when you're trying to convince stakeholders, it's something we all talked about and was even talked about a lot earlier. Short-term versus long-term thinking. Short-term sales now is not building a brand later, or sometimes your results don't actually get achieved until you've had the chance for the branding to kick in. So that's something that's really
I'll just
Yeah.
add investment.
yes.
People underestimate the amount of monetary investment, time, money, and talent, but money above all. Look at this guy.
Well, yeah, I know. Can we all have Colin's budget? No. Thank you, Lisa and Sarah, for an incredible day.